Hello and welcome to this edition of Wineskins. I'm your host, Father Jim Korda. Wineskins features reflections on the lives of the saints and the sacred scriptures, along with thoughts on a variety of topics and issues from a Catholic perspective. It is brought to you by the annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts, a division of the Society of St. Paul. On our show today, we will enjoy an interview with Sister Joan Franklin, who is the Parish Administrator at St. Patrick Church in Leetonia. We will also look at the life and times of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, and we will hear a reflection on the readings for this feast of the Holy Family of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. That and more coming up on Wineskins. In our current issue today, I will speak with Anthony Kobak about the Parish Leader program. Joining me now is Anthony Kobak, who is the Parish Leader at Immaculate Heart of Mary Parish in Austintown. Welcome to Wineskins.
Thank you, Father. It's good to be here.
You know, you've got a lot on your plate, like most people who lead in parishes, and so we'd like to get to know you a little bit better, but also get to know some of the wonderful things that's happening at Immaculate Heart. So tell us a little bit about yourself and about the parish.
First learned about the idea for lay leaders of leading parishes through Father Shorey a few years ago, and I was interested. I felt called to the church in this form of leadership potentially, and through a discernment process and being involved with the church or the diocese, this formation program, which was about a year long, me and about a dozen other people, some deacons, some religious, some other lay people, had gone through this. I guess from there, it was being appointed or selected and discerning which parish to be a part of. And I've been there since September 4th, and I'm finishing up my graduate degree in theology as well. And it's been a wonderful preparation, but nothing has prepared me other than God's grace to handle all of the dynamics of church life, as you know.
Sure. And I think that leads me to my next thought, and that's, was it everything that you expected, or is it more than what you expected?
That and more, so much more. I've always appreciated the priesthood, but I have a new profound appreciation for everything that you do and all priests, because there's so many aspects, so many pulls in the parish life that are needed. But I do have the support of the diocese, the canonical pastor, Father Fedor, our sacramental ministers. It's been wonderful, but I think as we were talking of just the laity and their need or their support in the church. Immaculate Heart has that, but I think they're going to be called to even do that even more, because the dynamics of the church are really changing so much.
Sure, and I think we would do ourselves a disservice if we don't talk about the idea that in this church that we live in today and minister in today is a little different than it was, even when I was first ordained almost 40 years ago. So those dynamics have changed and people change, but I think there's one thing that's always constant, and that's the presence of God and the presence of Jesus in the church. And so that's what we continue to lift up and to celebrate every time we gather as church, whether it's on the weekend masses or whether we gather for a parish meeting or a parish social function. And I think in your experience, you run into and you'll discover just different people with different personalities, different needs. And so we learn that over time, how to deal with those different things. What are some of the things that you do on a day-to-day basis in Immaculate Heart in your job as a parish leader?
At this point, a lot of it is just listening, learning, because as you mentioned, every parish is different, kind of approach liturgy and some different traditions sometimes. So I'm just kind of, at this point, I tell different staff and volunteers to kind of keep doing what they're doing, approving different expenditures, things like that. Bereavement and funerals are a big part of my time, at least right now, only because we've had pretty much a funeral every week since I've started. And there's staff meetings and just going to each of the different ministries or social groups that are out there and plugging in. Part of my ministry of presence is key to this as well.
That's really, I think, an important facet, is that you are the leader, the physical, visible leader in the day-to-day life of the church. And so your presence at these different organizations or different meetings is really key. And I think that is extremely important, because I think it gives people the sense that you're committed to them. You're there because you represent the church. And so that's really important. And I just want you just to mention what your greatest joy is in Immaculate Heart.
I think the people, the commitment that everyone's shown in this new model. It's not easy for some, even some priests, just in general. It's maybe confusing or how things are explained to be rolled out from the diocese. Sometimes people don't remember the information that's shared, but we have been prepared for this through the diocesan, the pastoral plan back in 2015. But I think the joy of people accepting change and saying we will get through this together, and as you mentioned, the connection through Christ and God will see us through this. And I think that's my greatest joy, is people's hope.
Well, Anthony Kobak, thank you so much for being here, and also for your leadership at Immaculate Heart and for the people of Austintown. Thank you.
Thanks, Father Korda.
For Wineskins, I'm Father Jim Korda. To tell us more about the life and times of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton is Tom Anderson. He is from St. Charles Church in Boardman.
This wife, mother, and foundress of a religious congregation was born Elizabeth Ann Bailey on August 28, 1774 in New York City, the daughter of an eminent physician and professor of what is now Columbia University. Brought up as an Episcopalian, she received an excellent education, and from her early years she manifested an unusual concern for the poor. In 1794, Elizabeth married William Seton, with whom she had 5 children. The loss of their fortune so affected William's health that in 1803, Elizabeth and William went to stay with Catholic friends at Livorno, Italy. William died 6 weeks after their arrival, and when Elizabeth returned to New York some 6 months later, she was already a convinced Catholic. She met with stern opposition from her Episcopalian friends, but was baptized Catholic on March 4, 1805. Abandoned by her friends and relatives, Elizabeth was invited by the superior of the Sulpicians in Baltimore to found a school for girls in that city. They were also permitted to make religious profession and to wear a religious habit. In 1809, Elizabeth moved her young community to Emmitsburg, Maryland, where she adopted as a rule of life an adaptation of the rule observed by the Sisters of Charity, founded by St. Vincent de Paul. While she maintained her ministry to the poor, and especially to black people, she also laid the foundation for what became the first American parochial school system. She trained teachers and prepared textbooks for use in the schools. She also opened orphanages in Philadelphia and New York City. She died at Emmitsburg, January 4, 1821, was beatified by Pope John XXIII in 1963, and was canonized by Pope Paul VI in 1975. The life and work of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton are of special significance to Catholics in the United States. The opening prayer of the Mass summarizes the principal phrases of her life and spirituality. Wife and mother, educator and foundress of the first religious congregation of women to have its origin in the United States. Eventually, the congregation multiplied into 7 distinct branches. St. Elizabeth Ann Seton dedicated her efforts especially to the care of the poor and to the Catholic education of youth. In the Office of Readings, there is an inspiring excerpt from one of St. Elizabeth's conferences to her Sisters of Charity. What was the rule of our dear Savior's life? You know it was to do the Father's will. Well then, the first end I propose in our daily work is to do the will of God. Secondly, to do it in the manner that He wills. And thirdly, to do it because it is His will. I know what is his will by those who direct me. Whatever they bid me do, if it is ever so small in itself, is the will of God for me. Then do it in the manner he wills it. For Wineskins, I'm Tom Anderson.
I welcome Sister Joan Franklin to Wineskins. It's nice to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Father.
I know that you are a Dominican Sister of Peace. You are also the Parish Administrator at St. Pat's in Leetonia, and that's going to basically be our focus today. I had an opportunity this whole month to talk with our new parish leaders from the different parishes in Navarre, Brewster, in Austintown, and also in Boardman. And you have really been a parish leader for a number of years. So tell us how you got into that position as a parish leader, but I think your title is a little different, Parish Administrator.
I went to Leetonia as an outreach coordinator for all the churches in 2007. And that job lasted for 2 years. And then it was running out, and Father Tom Eisworth was the pastor at St. Paul's in Salem and the canonical administrator at St. Patrick's in Leetonia. And then he knew that my job was ending, and he asked the bishop if he would appoint me to day-to-day taking care of St. Patrick's. So in 2009, I received a letter from the bishop appointing me as pastoral administrator, and Father Tom at the time, and now Father Bob Edwards, is the canonical administrator, and Father Bob is also the sacramental administrator at our parish.
Tell us some of the things that you do on a day-to-day basis.
Well, everything, really. You used to say about DRE, does really everything, but this job is the same. Of course, I'm there to take calls. I visit the parishioners that are sick or in the hospital or in their homes. I go to nursing homes. If there's a funeral, the funeral director calls me, and then I contact the organist, the servers, the luncheon ladies, and meet with the family, plan the funeral, do the wake service, and then help assist Father Bob at the cemetery service after the Mass. We have pastoral council, we have finance council, we have a lot of parish events, and I'm involved in all of them. I do some adult education things with the parish. We have just completed a 6-week series during Advent on Jesus, that Father DeCiano's program. Whatever comes up, I'm there.
Now, it's interesting because you've been in this position for a while. Were you able to give any advice or any mentoring to the other people that are part of the parish leader program now in our diocese? I'm sure you're well aware of who they are and what they're doing. Any advice or anything you've shared with them?
Some of them have called me and asked me, what I do and what happens and how the people accept me, and I've talked to several of them at meetings, but some of them have called me. I've gone to some parishes to talk about my role because they're looking to the future. If their priest would retire or if they have a leader, what they would be looking for. Sometimes they're looking for God himself.
Right.
They make a job description that no one could really.
Sure. Yeah. Jesus maybe, but that's about it. Yeah.
Right. But I love my work. I love the people. I've always felt accepted. They call me their main man, although I'm not a man.
Sure. Well, this phenomenon that we call parish leader, pastoral administrator, whatever the title, is really important in the life of the church and has been for some time. And it's not new just in the church, but it's been something that's been around for quite a while. It just so happens that certain dioceses, because of the fewer priest situation, are going into this mode of having parish leaders or parish administrators. What, in your experience, is the greatest benefit for a parish to have a parish leader?
I think it brings out their own leadership. They take ownership for their parish, and they pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And I said, if we're going to keep our parish, we have to step forward. I see that at St. Patrick's. We have cleaning teams that clean the buildings. We have lawn teams that do the yard work, and it just helps so much, and the people step forward. When I first went to St. Patrick's, I was so impressed. There was a storm. And I remember these branches were all over the yard, and half hour later, cars pulled up. They got out with their saws and their kids, and they cleaned up the yard. And I was just so impressed. And I hadn't called or asked anybody, but they were there. And they said, this is our church. We take care of it.
And isn't that important, because that whole sense of ownership, we can't do it all. The
Right.
administrator, the pastor cannot do it all. So we rely heavily on the folks and the parishioners to really participate. What would you like to tell parishes that might be having a parish leader in the future, in the near future, because we know with the fewer priests situation that that's going to be a reality? What would you help them understand a little better in what the parish leader is all about?
I would like to tell them to trust the Spirit, that the Spirit is always there to be helpful. And it's just very rewarding for them and for the parish to have someone they can go to. And I mentioned that to Bishop Murray, that if there's a parish without a priest resident, they need somebody that they can go to, that they can talk to. And if the roof's falling off, they need somebody to follow up on that, So I would tell the people to trust in the Spirit, and God knows what's best for them.
And what would be something in closing that you'd like to share with those parish leaders that are in the situation now, or those future parish leaders that are going to be coming into parish work in our diocese?
I've talked to some of the new leaders that are already in, but then I've talked to some that are waiting to be appointed. And they said they didn't apply to these parishes yet because the right one, they feel they'll know, when the right one comes along. I would just say to have courage, to trust, to have faith in the people. People come through, and they have their faith-filled moments that help all of us.
Well, Sister Joan Franklin, we thank you for being with us on Wineskins today, but we especially thank you for the wonderful ministry that you do in Leetonia, and you have been doing it for a number of years, and God bless you and your parishioners.
Thank you so much.
For Wineskins, I'm Father Jim Korda. For more information and to listen to Wineskins, please visit the website www.doy.org of the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hello, this is Bishop George Murray, and I want to take this opportunity to wish you and your families a very blessed Christmas season and a happy New Year. In these challenging times, we have a special opportunity in this season to count our blessings and to know that God is indeed in our midst. I am reminded of the words of the angel Gabriel spoken to Mary at her Annunciation. Nothing is impossible with God. Therefore, we pray to our Heavenly Father to grant peace to our world, joy to our hearts, and hope to our spirits. And may God's goodness be yours in abundance, especially during this holy season. God bless you.
$33 million Americans have descended into poverty. And as their futures fall, so does our nation's.
Our music today is provided by the Kellenberg Memorial High School Choir. It is from their CD called Upon a Midnight Clear.
Angels we have heard on high, sweetly singing o'er the plains, and the mountains in reply, echoing their joyous strains. Gloria in excelsis Deo. Gloria in excelsis Deo.
Shepherds, why this jubilee? Why your joyous strains prolong? Say what may the tidings be which inspire your heavenly song.
On this feast of the Holy Family of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, we will hear more about the sacred scriptures by Father Peter Totelben. He is from St. Dominic Church in Youngstown.
One of the most famous questions in Catholic theology is, why did God become man? What was the reason for the incarnation? People who ponder this question are usually thinking at several different levels. At one level, they're wondering whether Jesus had to become incarnate at all. At another level, they're asking, what's the precise reason that God could have for ordaining that the Word become flesh? What is the motive of the incarnation? The incarnation did not absolutely have to happen, of course. God could have freely prevented Adam from sinning. If Adam had sinned, God could have chosen not to restore the human race. Given that God did choose to restore the human race, He could have done it in any way He chose, even without the incarnation, and certainly without the suffering, death, and resurrection either, for that matter. None of this was absolutely necessary, at least in the sense that 2 + 2 must necessarily equal 4, or that the whole must necessarily be greater than the part. But when we consider the actions of a person, the whole idea of necessity takes on a new meaning. Sometimes, though our actions are technically free, we nevertheless feel compelled to do them. In fact, some might suggest, paradoxically enough, that we're the most free when we obey these inclinations. A mother is technically free to ignore her child when the child cries out in the middle of the night, but we know that a loving mother simply has to attend to the child that she loves. We might say that the mother is free so that she can do so, and that she's most free when she's most a mother, when she attends to her child. A mother who ignores her crying child is most likely not free. Something's hindering her from being a true mother. The incarnation is a bit like this. God did not have to become man. It was not absolutely necessary. He was free. But although God is free, He is not indifferent. For His very essence is goodness. His very being is mercy. Everything He does with the utmost wisdom and an unfathomable love. When God looks upon the misery of a world alienated from Him, He cannot help but have a heart for it. That's what it is to be merciful, to have a heart for the miserable. Mercy is love's response to misery, and it's the greatest name for God. It is in the very nature of mercy to bend down toward the wretched to lift them up. It is in the very nature of goodness to share itself with others. And a wise and loving God does this most of all. Although God is technically free to ignore our cries, nevertheless, He simply can't. God shows His almighty freedom precisely in electing to redeem us. God shows how free He is by attending to our cries and rescuing us. Because it turns out that God is most God when he is at work drawing us close to himself. God is most God when he shares his life with us. A God who wouldn't do this wouldn't be much of a God. And so, God takes on human flesh in Jesus. In Jesus Christ, God diffuses his very life into this world. In Jesus, God makes good on all of the promises that he made, going right back to the fall of our first parents. In Jesus, God comes close to us. He bends down to us in mercy, so to raise us up to the glory that he has shared with his Father since the beginning. Jesus' incarnation does not touch the world merely at a surface level. Jesus could have become incarnate in a palace, remote from the concerns of ordinary people. But he didn't do that. Jesus became incarnate to experience everything that we experience, the good parts and the bad parts. Jesus became incarnate to redeem us by suffering and dying on the cross. Jesus became incarnate to free us from everything that would separate us from God. God became man to die on the cross, to remove the world's alienation from God, and to reintroduce us to the glory that God intended for us when he made our first parents and set them in paradise. Simeon and Anna realized all of this, and because they realized it, they lived their life on it. They staked their life on God's goodness. They bet it all on God's mercy. They understood that the fate of the world and the fate of all history turned on the presence of the Christ child. Simeon and Anna longed to see the goodness of God appear on the earth. They yearned for the mercy of God to heal the world, and they awaited the consolation of Israel. They saw in Jesus the God who became incarnate to suffer and die, and so liberate the world from suffering and death. And even more, they held him in their own hands. Simeon and Anna show us how to welcome Jesus into our lives. And they show us that meeting Jesus is the only way to live a full and complete life, because Jesus himself is the way, the truth, and the life. For Wineskins, I'm Father Peter Totelben.
The real things, the great traditions, the high ideals, the deep faiths, as we see them expressed in the Holy Family of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Hold on to those and carry them with you into the new year of grace. Wineskins is made possible through the annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts. Our program is produced by CTNY, the Catholic Telecommunications Network of Youngstown. I'm Father Jim Korda, thanking you for being with us today. Have a blessed Sunday, a happy New Year, and a safe holiday week.